the head office of Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company and the Ikeja business unit of the DISCO were last Thursday attacked and vandalized by officers from the Nigerian Air Force Base in Oshodi, Lagos. According to the Ikeja DISCO officials, the Air Force personnel insisted on being reconnected despite their reluctance to offset the cost of pending electricity bills, as well as established cases of electricity theft in the past. The Air Force men were said to have embarked on a rampage, breaking down doors as they searched for the chief executive officer of the company, Mrs. Folake Shoeton. Reports say when they eventually found her, she was assaulted and forced into the trunk of a car. The crisis began after Ikeja DISCO disconnected power supply to the Air Force Base in the wake of the military unit's refusal to allow the installation of electric meters in their premises while bypassing the legal power connections. Meanwhile, barely 2 days after, Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu and the Transmission Company of Nigeria celebrated a peak electricity generation of 6,000 megawatts. The national grid on Friday crashed to 1,400 megawatts, plunging the nation into darkness. The 25 active power plants on the grid were said to be generating about 5,623 megawatts of electricity as of 1 a.m. on Friday. The generation drastically dropped to 3,585 megawatts by 7 a.m. and continued to decline until it fell to 1,400 megawatts by 3 a.m. the same day. Some electricity distribution companies had already issued public notices to customers, informing them of a system outage at 2 p.m., which cut them off from the national grid. The latest collapse of the national grid will be the second time in 2025. Again, banks all over the country have commenced the implementation of the new automated teller machine transaction fee charge on customers, following a directive from the Central Bank of Nigeria. This development is said to have become a source of distress for many bank customers. The Central Bank of Nigeria had on February 10, 2025, released a circular to all banks and other financial institutions to apply the fees with effect from March the 1st. The Apex Bank explained that the move was in response to rising costs and the need to improve the efficiency of ATM services in the banking industry. For an overview of those tariff-related customer protection developments, I'm now being joined by Dr. Muda Yusuf, Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Public Enterprise, and a former Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Good to have you on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show.
Thank you very much,
Dr. Muda Yusuf. Well, you promote...
Great to see you again. Welcome back.
After 8 years, I needed to take some vacation. Anyway, you promote private enterprise. Now, all these issues have to do with private enterprises and their survival and the interests of consumers. Now, the Ikeja DISCO, the Nigeria Air Force sent their men there, vandalize people. As we speak, 15 of the staff of Ikeja DISCO are in hospital. Some of them have hypertension. They have not recovered from it. Ikeja DISCO owing 4 trillion naira.
4 billion.
Is it 4 billion?
Yeah, 4 billion.
Not trillion. 4 billion. What's the difference? Should they even owe 1 kobo and refuse to pay? And then the business said, we're going bankrupt because we are just managing debt. They switched them off. They went there with lorry loads of Air Force officials. MK Abiola once referred to them as mad dogs. And they went there and vandalized the place, brutalized the people, and would they get away with it? Should public sector owe for services rendered, and they will beat people on top of it? What's your take?
Really, it's really very, very unfortunate that we had that kind of incident. And the good thing is that the air officer commanding logistics command, because we were told that these Air Force personnel were from the logistics command in Ikeja. The head of that place is the air officer commanding logistics command. At least there was a report that he had gone to apologize, to the Ikeja Electric. He went there at least with some top members of the Air Force there. So to that extent, at least one should appreciate the fact that they knew that what had happened is something that is very, very bad, and they had to come forward to apologize. But that is not enough. It is important to ensure that there are consequences for that. Otherwise, you are likely to see a repeat of that kind of things. Not necessarily with the Ikeja Air Force men, but around the country. And we have seen incidents of that even in the past, where electricity officers were brutalized either for disconnecting barracks or military formations and so on and so forth. So we need to bring sanity into that space. This is not a jungle where the rule of the force, should be prevailing. So there should be consequences for that. And we hope that the AOC, that's the Air Officer Commanding, will live up to his promise that investigation will be done and that there will be consequences for that. And having said that, I think we need to address the larger issue of the power sector. Now, the power sector has been, groaning under 3 or 4 major losses. One of it is what we just discussed. It's part of the commercial losses, where people consume electricity and they don't pay. And yet, we expect the discos and the entire power sector value chain to deliver value in terms of electricity. It cannot be sustainable. They also suffer a lot of technical losses. Technical losses arise from the quality of their equipment. In the days of the privatization, of course, there were some issues at that point, because there were issues around the quality of the companies that took over the power companies at that time. We also have issues with the transmission company. The transmission equipment, which is currently in the hands of government, are very old. The discos also don't have enough capacity to invest in equipment. So there's a whole lot of technical losses that have been experienced within the power sector. There's also the issue of collection losses, which is also related to these commercial losses. There are so many areas where there are issues of metering. They are not being metered. There are concerns about electricity theft, estimated billing. All these problems are there. So when we talk about lack of liquidity within the power sector, these are some of the problems. And unless we put a structure in place to ensure that we have adequate cash flow within the power sector value chain, we continue to have this challenge with power. And one of the biggest problems we have today, as far as the economy and productivity is concerned, is the cost of energy, particularly power supply. Okay,
Dr. Yusuf. What we're told is that the Air Force, the Ikeja base of the Air Force, has been owing money for 7 years. The Ikeja disco officials, they said they've been writing them for 7 years to pay 4 billion, and they refuse. And now you say they have apologized for vandalizing the premises, for brutalizing people, for sending up to 15 people to the hospital. In fact, the staff of Ikeja Disco, they are so scared now, they don't want to come to the office. Even NECA has told them to stay away before Air Force will come back and beat people. So what are you suggesting? Is the apology enough? Or the federal government should compel the Nigerian Air Force to pay its debts? Or the people who went there and brutalized people should be sanctioned, should be punished? There should be consequences for bad behavior, because nobody is above the law because they wear uniform.
I agree with you, Dr. Abati. Okay. There has to be consequences.
Yes, what are you recommending?
Well, within the military, they have their own way of dealing with people. It could be suspension, whatever it is. They have their own court martial to deal with people who have misbehaved in this way. But those two things must happen. The debt has to be paid, and this is not peculiar to Ikeja, the Air Force. Because the report we have is that Many of the military formations, many of the federal government offices are in similar situation. In fact, there was a time there was even a conversation around even the presidential villa itself, owing the electricity companies, you know. So it is a common problem across all military formation and many of the public offices. There is this sense of entitlement that because, you know, we are a military or we are in the public sector, we are a federal ministry, we are the villa, we are free to enjoy free electricity. I think that mindset needs to change because we are dealing with a private sector entity. We are dealing with a situation where they are struggling to ensure liquidity within the system. The sustainability of many of the discos is at risk. Many of them have even given up. If you look at it now, almost 80% of them, their licenses or the whole ownership has been taken away from them because they could not just sustain it because of all these issues issue of cost-reflective tariff, technical losses, commercial losses, energy theft. You know, right as we speak now, the GENCOs, according to the minister, are being owed 350 billion as at 2024. And if the GENCOs don't have the money, how will they pay the gas suppliers? So these are some of the very big issues within the power sector value chain. This issue of electricity, you know, either electricity theft or refusal to pay is a major part of it. But there are also very significant parts of it. Some of the big part of it is also the issue of tariff, although that is not a popular thing to be discussing. But there's also the issue of tariff. Because if you don't generate the liquidity, the system, because it is the tariff that will feed the discos, the transmission companies, the generating companies, and the gas suppliers.
Okay.
So there's a major reform that needs to take place there.
Dr. Yusuf, I agree with you. There are other issues.
Yes.
You have mentioned tariff, you have mentioned the brutalization, physical assault on officials, and other issues within the value chain. One other issue is the national grid. About the same time we were talking about Ikeja Disco being physically attacked, the grid went down from 5,885 megawatts to 1,400. Now, the transmission company of Nigeria says, no, it's not grid collapse, it's line tripping. But the truth of the matter is that most parts of Nigeria, you know, went back to darkness. The second time that the grid will collapse in the year 2025. In the year 2024, the national grid collapsed about 20 times on a monthly basis, sometimes twice within a month. So why is the national grid perpetually collapsing? And a country of over 200 million people is trapped for the better part in darkness. What are the implications for private enterprise? And what do you think we need to do?
Well, the implications for businesses are very, very profound in terms of the cost of operation, in terms of the productivity of businesses, and also in terms of even the sustainability of businesses. There are many businesses that have gone under because of this challenge of electricity failure. Because the alternative for them is to resort to self-generation of electricity. That's the use of diesel. That is not cheap either. And you need energy to power an economy. If you don't have adequate supply, sustainable supply, also at a reasonable cost to support an economy, the economy cannot progress. That is part of the reason why we are struggling with issues of growth, issues of job creation, and all of that. And that is part of the reason why most of the investment now are in the service sector. There's very little investment in production. Industrialization is suffering as a result of the problem of power. You know, and you need this on-grid power to support real industrialization in an economy. So it has very serious consequences, you know, for the economy. But the truth of the matter is that the transmission equipments are extremely very old. Some of them are 30, 40, 50 years. And there has not been any major investment in this transmission grid. So in a sense, this is also a legacy problem. Because at this age, the efficiency begins to decline. So you need real funding. I mean, I think I read somewhere where the power minister was saying that we need at least 2 trillion to be able to fix the power situation. You know? And government, of course, has a lot to do in terms of investing in that space. That is about prioritization of government expenditure. But the private sector investment in that space also need to sustain their investment. And there's a limit to which the government can also continue to support with subsidy. I think we need to be frank about that. I'm not saying that government should exit completely, because when you talk of energy or electricity, there's a social component to it. So government should have a role to play. But again, you have to meet both business and the household halfway. So that if we adjust the tariff a little, government should also put in something a lot more from its own budget to ensure that we have a sustainable power.
Tariff a little high. They've increased tariffs again and again. We now live to pay electricity bills.
No.
It's just that we don't get in the electricity.
We are not. No, there's still a big issue with tariff, especially.
Oh, you mean there's still room for further increase?
No, I'm not talking of band A people now. I'm talking of band B and C.
No, I would rather be in band C.
That is the issue, really. There's a major liquidity crisis, and we have to come to terms with that. Government has to put something, and those of us who are consumers also have to put something on the table. That is the reality of the matter.
Where do you think the fault line is? This is the question I ask all the time. The transmission company of Nigeria will say, well, we are not at fault. The problem is with distribution, generation. The Gencos will say, no, it's because of the distribution companies, the discos. The problem is transmission. They just pass the buck. And no minister of power has been able to put his fingers correctly on the source of the problem.
You see, the major issue in that value chain is investment. We have Gencos who have capacity. We have the gas suppliers who are ready to supply the gas. But there is no adequate investment in the transmission. If you don't have adequate investment, I mean, we are talking of equipment that are 30, 40 years old.
So
how much carrying power do they have? There has to be investment. Then there also have to be investment at the level of the distribution. Most of the discos did not have the capacity to invest in scaling up the capacity, in investing in the necessary equipment, to support electricity distribution.
Okay.
So there's a major issue, especially at the transmission level and at the distribution level.
Okay. So this year, we should expect more national grid collapses. Whether they call it line tripping or they call it grid collapse,
no, if the government,
the people that suffer.
It is the people, but government has to rise to this responsibility, because energy is at the heart of economic activities. If we don't get it right with energy, we cannot get it right with many of the things that we do in the economy. The cost of services, the cost of production will continue to be very high. Productivity will continue to suffer. So it's a major hurdle that we still need to cross as far as the totality of this economic reform is concerned. I sympathize with those who are in the administration, because it's not easy now to come and say that we are taking subsidy away again from the power sector. That is politically very costly. It's socially also very costly, but it's a catch-22 situation, in my view.
Okay, let me talk about the third topic, which is about ATM withdrawals. Now, when the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced this idea of electronic banking, use of ATMs, the idea was to reduce pressure on the banks, to also promote financial inclusion and all of that. But now we're being told that you will pay more if you go and use ATM on site, that is your bank. You will pay 100 naira per withdrawal, up to 20,000. If you withdraw less than 20,000, you still pay 100 naira. If you go to a bank that is not yours and you use their ATM machine, you will pay the 100 naira, you will pay maybe an additional 500 naira. If you add all of this to the fact that the banks, they take charges when you do transfer, they charge you for maintenance of your account, you find people, having to pay more. This has become effective, they say. since March 1. Now, even if you withdraw less than 20,000, you still pay that 100 naira charge, those charges that have been disclosed. Would this not, defeat the purpose of intermediation, of financial inclusion?
It will. It will, if the cost is that high. But what I heard initially was that if you withdraw on site, you are not going to be charged.
No, you'll be charged 100 naira.
Okay.
Per 20,000 or less.
I think this cost needs to be reviewed. But what I can say is that, you see, in business, good business practice rests on 3 major pillars. It rests on issue of profitability, that is reward to the shareholders. Because if you don't have shareholders, if you don't have investments or investors, you will not have a business in the first place. Their interest matters. Then the interest of the people matters. That is, now we are talking now about the customers that you are serving. We are talking about your employees. We are talking about your suppliers. And we are talking about community where you operate. That is the second pillar of a responsible business behavior. The third pillar is the environment. Whatever business you do, you must care about the environment in which you are operating. Environment in the sense of how you manage your waste, energy use, and all of that, so that you don't degrade the environment. They call it triple bottom line. Now, where I'm going is that we should have authorities to weigh all this interest. Because we need to balance the interest of those who are investing with the interest of the consumers. We should not be skewed one way or the other. That is the essence of the Competition Commission, the regulatory authorities. Somebody should look at the numbers. They should look at the figures. So that if to determine whether actually these prices or these charges are exploitative or they are too high. Because the reality is that for many of these institutions, the cost of operation had gone up up to 100% over the last 1 or 2 years. In some cases, up to 200%. When you look at the cost they are using to operate, especially as a result of the foreign exchange component, many of these equipment are imported.
Dr. Yusuf, these ATMs were not functioning anyway. You go to the ATM, there's never money there. Okay, all of a sudden, they say they want to improve efficiency. We have not seen that improvement in efficiency because many of the ATMs are not working. And then how do you explain the fact that if you go to the POS people, they charge less. If you ask them to send 150,000, they will take maybe 5,000 from you. If you go to the ATM, the bank, you will pay more, and you will not even get the money. How do you explain that?
We have to interrogate that. That is why I was talking about data. Those in authority because we need to protect the interests of both sides. No side of this equation should feel shortchanged. We need to look at the data. If it is exploitative, of course, the CBN has to intervene.
No, it's extortionist.
Yes.
Extortion. That's a stronger word.
You see, Dr. Abati, you need data. You need to back these things with facts. Let us see the variables driving their costs. Let us see their own submission. Let us see their own justification. And from there, you'll be able to take a decision. So that the verdict is not entirely either sentimental or emotional. We have to relate to facts. That is where I think we should approach it, Dr. Abati.
I thought you will protect consumers.
No, we have to protect both sides. Because if you don't protect investors, those ATMs will not even be there in the first place. Yes. If there's no money to be made, it's not a charity organization. Why will you go and put the ATM there? Then you can as well scrap it.
Okay, now that they are taking more charges from ATMs, even when you go to the banks will tell you half of the time that they don't have money. How can you keep your money in the bank? There's no money in the ATM. You go into the banking hall. A bank will be telling you there's no money. Where are they putting our money?
Recently, I think the central bank governor even sanctioned some banks as a result of this particular issue. And ever since that sanction took place, there has been some improvement in cash availability within the banking system. At least I noticed that. Even within the ATM and the banks, before that sanction, the whole place, you couldn't even find any cash at all. If you go to some banks,
when
maybe they ration.
cash, they will bring you dirty notes.
Well,
Nigeria is the only country on the West African coast where they don't have new notes for customers.
Well,
it's an abuse of the rights of the banking customer.
These are things that we need. And unfortunately, when you go to parties and all these people are hawking the currency, you see the brand new notes there. So these are some of the dysfunctionalities within the system. Because of course there are new notes, but somehow these new notes find their way to some other channels, you know. So these are regulatory issues, actually. The regulators should step up, you know, to ensure that we tidy up all of these things.
Yeah, anyway, we need people like you. I know you are promoting private enterprise, but also defend the interests of the long-suffering consumers, customers in the marketplace of Nigeria.
We have to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on This Day Live.